issue that the denial of existence of gender, that because that's the thing where kind of it's impossible to find it on the account.
We're about to get started.
I just wanted to say that.
So I just want to let you know what session this is to make sure that we're in the right space. This is a side event called Canaries in the Coal Mine, linking the human rights of LGBTQI plus persons in the OSCE region with democratic resilience. Is everybody in the right place? Excellent. So glad. Well, let me start out by just saying a very warm welcome to all of you. With such a busy schedule this week and last, I know there are a lot of places you could be right now, so it really is a great pleasure to know that you've chosen to come to this very warm room to talk about the LGBTQI community and what more we can do to support each other. My name is Jessica Stern, and I'm the U.S. Special Envoy for the advancement of the human rights of lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, and intersex persons. And it is my great honor to say that this event has been co-sponsored by 14 participating states, and I want to thank our co-sponsors right now, including the governments of Sweden, the UK, Finland, Ireland, the Netherlands, Norway, Germany, Canada, Luxembourg, Iceland, Switzerland, Denmark, and France. And I think the fact that so many governments have joined together to create this event is a real indication of the political will to support LGBTQI plus inclusion in the OSCE. We have an hour for this conversation and a pretty ambitious agenda. But what we've done is we've invited a number of leaders from civil society and government to speak from their respective perspectives about the urgency that they see in trying to address the priorities in LGBTQI people's lives and the kind of responses that are needed from the diplomatic community, both from governments in their individual capacity and from international organizations like the OSCE. I'll just start by saying that although there isn't an explicit political mandate to work on LGBTQI plus issues at the OSCE, any mechanism that is charged with security and cooperation has to work on the safety and security of LGBTQI plus people. LGBTQI plus issues don't only exist in the realm of human rights. LGBTQI issues are inextricably linked to national security, economic opportunity, public health, climate change, and regional and global cooperation. And I think that's what our panelists today are really going to elucidate for all of us. So with that, I would like to invite Ambassador Anna Olsen-Bereng, the permanent representative of Sweden to the OSCE, to provide opening remarks.
Thank you, Special Envoy Stern, and also say how good it is to see such a good turnout, given that there are other important events going on at the same time, and I definitely feel I am in the right place. And as highlighted in the concept note for this event, human rights are universal and apply equally to everyone, regardless of sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression, or any other status. And that is what this event is really all about. And as you will know, all OSCE participating states committed already in the Helsinki Final Act 49 years ago to respect human rights and uphold the UN Universal Declaration on Human Rights and other international human rights obligations. And similarly, all OSCE states have committed themselves to the principle of equality and to combating all forms of discrimination and intolerance, and to addressing and combating hate crimes. And I think at the outset here, it is important to recall that ensuring LGBTQI persons' enjoyment of human rights does not imply the recognition of any new rights, nor is it about imposing any specific values or ideology. It is about safeguarding equality and freedom from violence and discrimination for all. And these are obligations that states are already legally bound by under international human rights law. Now, over the last decades, we have seen progress for LGBTQI equality in many countries across the OSCE region. However, progress is uneven, and in many countries, there is a negative and dangerous development where human rights are being violated and no longer granted equally to everyone. And as the Special Envoy Stern just referred to, this is a concern for security, both on a regional and interregional level. And it's also the case that, of course, that restrictions targeting the LGBTQI persons are often an indicator of broader democratic backsliding and backtracking on human rights. The situation in Russia is particularly concerning. In 2018, the OSCE Moscow Mechanism report on the Chechen Republic documented a particularly dire situation for LGBTQI persons. And more recently, Russia's so-called gay propaganda law, which initially prohibited providing information about so-called non-traditional sexual relationships to minors, was extended in 2022 to all age groups. And in November 2023, the Russian Supreme Court declared the so-called international LGBTQI movement to be an extremist organization, further persecuting and stigmatizing the LGBTQI community in Russia and stifling civil society and human rights defenders. Another recent and worrying example is the Georgian legislative package on so-called family values and protection of minors, restricting the rights of LGBTQI persons and other Georgians, undermining fundamental rights and increasing stigmatization. This package is a further step in the wrong direction and runs counter to Georgia's EU path. There is also continued, and in many cases worsening, discrimination and hostility against LGBTQI persons in other participating states. Discriminatory rhetoric and the spread of disinformation appears at the highest levels of politics and society, as well as attempts to pass so-called gay propaganda legislation. And there are still 2 OSCE participating states enforcing laws that criminalize consensual same-sex relations, serving as a justification not only for the arrests of LGBTQI persons, but also for intimidation, extortion, blackmail, violence, and torture. And it goes without saying that countries that claim to be tolerant must do better than this and truly commit to the principle of equality and combating all forms of discrimination and intolerance. But despite all the challenges, I think we should remain hopeful that we, governments, institutions, human rights defenders, and civil society can continue to overcome obstacles to enable LGBTQI persons to live a life where their rights and identity are fully respected. And last but not least, I want to address the representatives of civil society and human rights defenders directly and thank you for being crucial agents for change. Much of the progress made would never have come about if it wasn't for you pushing the agenda forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Bering. And I really appreciate, especially in this space, that you concluded by recognizing that all of the progress that has been advanced is made possible by human rights defenders like people in this room. Now we are going to move into the panel portion of our conversation today. We have 4 extraordinary human rights leaders who are focused on advancing equality and safety for LGBTQI plus people who are joining us today. We are going to hear both case studies and analysis coming from leaders and experts from Georgia, Ukraine, Armenia, and Russia. And I'd like to turn to the first panelist, Ega Tseratelli from the Women's Initiative Support Group from Georgia. Would you open the conversation by telling us a little bit about how the new law in Georgia, the so-called Family Values and Protection of Minors law that has really seized global attention, came to be, and what threat it poses to not only LGBTQI people in Georgia, but to all Georgians? And just a reminder to all of our panelists, we'll have 2 minutes for opening remarks.
Thank you very much for this invitation and for interest for all of you to hear about our country developments. Sadly, I would admit that Georgia, during decades, be a leader country of democratization in the region, now facing dramatic backsliding towards authoritarian regime. And this process is quite evident during the past 1.5 years. And it resulted, I would say, with introducing cascades of repressive laws, not only LGBTQI propaganda, but also so-called foreign agent law, claiming transparency law, or eliminating gender quotas, and etc., which aiming to eliminate or to suspend critical voices in civil society, and to further gain control over the processes in the wider public. And I would say, and I wanted to ask a question: why this failing in democracy is happening? Because Georgia was not the exception of this process. We saw the similar processes in Russia, in Belarus, Azerbaijan, and also in other countries, Kyrgyzstan, and etc. When transitional democratic countries transforming very easily in autocratic regimes, and the only leverage democratic process had in these countries, leverage of international advocacy, leverage of international human rights law, making progress in the on the national level are losing, and at the end we face only this process. So maybe I can stop here. Yeah, and maybe the answer is how we perceive the progress of democratic processes in the countries. Are the indicators of democratization well enough developed? Are the quantitative indicators is enough to measure whether democratic process is there and whether sustainable changes are there? And I would say the LGBTQI issues are really a litmus test for democratization, and how we can measure this progress, that's a question. And I think we should find an answer in that.
Thanks, Edda. I really appreciate that you said LGBTQI issues are a litmus test for democratization. I just want to underscore that, because sometimes when I speak with other governments or even civil society working on other issues, there's a sort of implied question. Why do we have to spend so much time on LGBTQI rights? Don't you guys get enough attention in general? And I think this argument that you're making, which is equally about LGBTQI issues and other marginalized and vulnerable groups, really illustrates the way the targeting of specific communities, LGBTQI, racial minorities, religious minorities, etc., becomes a test of the rule of law for all. I'd like to go from Edda to Tanya Kasian from Fulcrum, Ukraine. Tanya, same question for you. 2 minutes.
Yeah, I would like to talk about attitude of Ukrainians towards LGBT and laws and partnerships. This is what we work on with my organization. So I think, and polls also show that Russian invasion of Ukraine influenced on the democracy process and on Ukrainians' attitude towards LGBT tremendously. But before full-scale invasion, less than 30% of Ukrainians supported equal rights for LGBT and in particular civil partnerships. Now, this number is 56% of Ukrainians support civil partnerships, equal rights for LGBT, according to our National Democracy Institute survey. We have this good percentage among society. We have a rise among members of parliament because thanks to our cooperation with Ina Sosson, she's liberal, she's from Party House, we registered our first draft of law civil partnerships in the history of Ukraine in 2023. We have the highest percentage of coming outs among LGBT military now. It's more than 50. 50 LGBT military who live with open faces, but there are a lot of them who live with closed faces because army is quite a homophobic place. And we don't have goodwill among politicians to support this draft law. Only 5 committees of the Rada voted for it, and now this draft law is kind of frozen. So if you ask me how you could help us, I would say talk to our executives, explain that it is the rule of law. Ukraine violates European Convention on Human Rights. Actually, there is a case against Ukraine in the European Court on Human Rights. It was a decision in June 2023, and Ukraine still didn't do anything. So I think that we have this lack of knowledge and information among our politicians. Nevertheless, that they have like the increasing number of supporters among society.
Thank you so much, Tanya. I really appreciate that there wasn't just analysis in that, but also action. So a very specific request to the diplomats in the room to raise LGBTQI issues when we have the opportunity to speak with our counterparts in the government.
May I add one sentence? We know at least about 11 gay soldiers who were killed on frontline at the moment. We know about open cases, and these guys, they died for country which didn't recognize them. It's injustice, it's unfair, and we need to protect the people who protect us. Thank you.
Thank you for that sobering point, Tanya. I'd like to go from Ukraine to Armenia, and I'm going to invite my colleague Angelique Shirimian from Freedom House Armenia to speak. One of the things I've observed is that the struggles of the LGBTQI community in Armenia tend not to make it into the global news cycle. And so, unlike in other contexts, I'd like to ask you to start with the basics. What do we in this room need to know about the priorities for the LGBTQI community in Armenia?
Thank you. I actually wanted to start my speech thanking for including me in this panel because exactly to prove your point, because the situation in Armenia is not given enough platform to be spoken about. So, but it's really important because at my organization, because we do these democratic ratings, we usually call Armenia one of the glimpses of hope in the region because of the democratic development at home. But there are a lot of issues that need to be addressed as well. When the post-revolutionary, more liberal government came to power, there were a lot of hopes that there will be these radical changes. We had really high expectations from the government. Unfortunately, because of the crisis in the country, this development was stagnated. Armenia is a country of contrast. On one hand, currently we have legislative initiatives and we have policies that in one way or another support the anti-discrimination policies, in one way or another support the rights of LGBT community, but on the other hand I have to say that the system itself stays very homophobic. For example, currently we have an anti-discrimination law, the draft of anti-discrimination law. We never had anti-discrimination law in Armenia, but unfortunately sexual orientation and gender identity are not one of the criteria included in the law. We have in the law on domestic violence included civil partnership, which means that gay couples, lesbian couples can also seek protection when it comes to domestic violence. But we also see how the police, for example, last year raided a gay-friendly club in Armenia, and not only physically but also psychologically harassed LGBT community. So there are all of these issues, and I think one of the solutions can be, again, speaking a lot about this, because we see what happens when there is no accountability. Just echoing what my colleagues already mentioned, there is this importance to hold the governments accountable and always pay attention to what they are doing, even if we call them these glimpses of hope.
Thanks so much, Angelique. And thank you also for giving us two really concrete examples of where that hope is alive. So there is hope to have stronger domestic violence protections, but they have to be LGBTQI inclusive. And a non-discrimination law is only as strong not only as its enforcement, but as its reach. And so it really needs to include categories such as sexual orientation and gender identity. Next, I have the great pleasure of going to Russia. We're going to hear from Katya Dikovskaya, who's going to help me to pronounce her name much better, who's going to speak to us from the Spirit Foundation in Russia. And Katya, we have been talking several times today about the broadly defined and quite threatening LGBTQI extremist law. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about your actual assessment of it and the threat that it poses to LGBTQI activism and LGBTQI people in Russia.
Thank you. And dear friends, I would like to speak Russian because it's very important for me. I don't want that my language associated with instruction. Начало полномасштабного вторжения России в Украину в России было принято несколько анти-ЛГБТ законов, которые отразились на жизни всего общества, не только жизни людей. Самый первый закон, который был принят, это был закон о запрете пропаганды среди всех возрастов, потому что с 2013 года в России действовал закон о запрете пропаганды в течение совершеннолетних. Позже был принят закон о запрете пропагандирования прикола, и людей сейчас нет возможности не только менять гендерные маркеры документов, но у них отсутствует полностью доступ к медицинской помощи. Они не могут получать терапию, которая обычно означает жизнь. И, конечно, последнее, что касается права детей, это было решение Верховного Суда Российской Федерации о признании несуществующего международного движения ЛГБТ-экстремизма. Этот закон в корне изменил всю жизнь ЛГБТ людей, активистов и правозащитников в России, потому что он касается не только людей, которые себя ассоциируют как ЛГБТ, но и людей, которые помогают им. Это юристы, правозащитники, общественные организации. Теперь любое упоминание в СМИ, и даже независимо от контекста, научное это издание, или это фильмы, или это книги, это все попадает под действие этого решения. Поэтому сейчас уже в России есть 3 уголовных дела, которые были возбуждены в отношении людей после принятия этого закона, и люди находятся в заключении.
Katya, thank you for outlining the steps that have led to the verdict in the Supreme Court case. It makes it clear that this has been a clear and deliberate progression and escalation over more than a decade. And I think it is incredibly important to understand what LGBTQI Russians and their allies have been subjected to, because so many of these test cases in Russia have been copied by other countries regionally and cross-regionally. So maybe I can put this question out to the panel, starting with Eka, who I think was interested in speaking to this. Do you see a role of Russian thought and these kinds of text laws that have been incubated in Russia influencing developments and perceptions of LGBTQI issues?
for this question. Short answer could be yes, but I would like to elaborate a bit more on that. We should remember that Georgia and the other countries also have heritage of Soviet past, which means that starting from the 30s of last century, when the Soviet Union started to incorporate their ideology, homophobia, these homophobic attitudes were very well integrated in the public. Yeah? And this was used very powerful ideological tool in many years, and we never rethink it, and we never criticize these attitudes, and these homophobic attitudes very easily transformed in newly emerged the thoughts that LGBTQI rights are something very something different and exported from European or American democratic countries, and we do not have people with this orientation and etc. So it's a little bit historically how it emerged, but even after the collapse of Soviet Union, during 30 years of independence in Georgia, none of politicians or political parties put efforts to decrease or eliminate this homophobic attitude in society, or do something to change positively these attitudes largely. And besides that, this new ideology very well imported from Russia to Georgia, and our politicians did not bother to develop new concept of the law. They just copy-pasted already emerged law from Russian Federation, and even conclude in one package all work done during 10 years of Russian legislation. So yes, the influence is evident, and many far-right groups are very similar to narratives from Russia, and influence was there. But now we are facing the moment when our government inherited this narrative from far-right groups, and they are vocalizing it as their own narratives. That is why this is very dangerous taking for our country. Well, our government is openly anti-liberally and anti-democratically named and shamed marginalized groups, and try to shrinking space and try to gain control over the personal life of voters.
I would like to add, yes, I also agree that the roots are from Soviet Union, and actually from jail system in Soviet Union, when gays mean like they're pedophiles, etc. And Russia still has this narrative. Also, just like looking back to Putin's speech when he was speaking about annexing Zaporizhia, Kherson, Luhansk, and Donetsk region, my native city, Mariupol, is an occupation. And he told that Russia fights for traditional family values and against father one, father two. And we knew in the beginning of this delegation that there could be a list of human rights defenders who support LGBT rights, and actually a lot of us were like terrified by this list. And this narrative is really strong. It was built like for years, and we hear it sometimes among Ukrainians, also for right Ukrainians. They just repeat Russian propaganda in the comments on Facebook, etc. But also church influence. Maybe you heard that last month Russian Orthodox Church finally is banned in Ukraine by the law, but we will need like 9 months to finally close it. And church also played a huge role in Russian migration in Ukraine, not only against LGBT, but all over Ukrainians.
Да, и еще я бы хотела сказать, что мы должны понимать эту тревожную тенденцию, которая исходит из Российской Федерации, о том, что вот этот нарратив традиционных ценностей, которым государство прикрывает подобные законы, тенденция от традиционных ценностей к экстремизму, к сожалению, может быть воспринята другими государствами, так как это, например, произошло в Грузии. И мы также опасаемся, что, может быть, какие-то ультраправые партии правительства точно так же могут это применять.
Thanks so much to each of our speakers on that point. It's ironic that regardless of the region, one of the primary arguments used to invalidate the claims for dignity and rights of LGBTQI people is the constant refrain that LGBTQI people don't exist here. And respect for LGBTQI people's humanity must be imported from somewhere else. And what I hear is that there are these model laws that seek to dehumanize LGBTQI people that are actually, in some cases, even being copied and pasted into other jurisdictions. It's not just Russian laws that we're seeing this, we're also seeing laws from many other countries around the world picking up the same themes. And this emergent body of laws is a new and fundamental, I would even argue, existential threat to human rights norms and standards. Because these laws equate access to information about LGBTQI people with so-called propaganda, which is a violation of freedom of expression. These laws seek to ban LGBTQI people's organizations, which is a violation of the right to freedom of assembly and association. And so if we let these laws succeed and take root, not only do they have the potential to set the LGBTQI movements back in these and many other countries by decades, they can also set back movements for human rights more broadly. Which is why I want to move from that very depressing reality to something a little bit more hopeful. And I actually want to talk about the role of allies. And I want to talk about allies, starting with you, Andrew. Talking about allies in government, talking about allies in mainstream civil society organizations like your own, talking about any allies that you've been able to work with. How's it going?
So my colleagues very well narrated the reasons that the region is in the situation that it is, and we can debate these narratives for a very long time. What we see in Armenia, I think the changes in Armenia are happening because the LGBT community itself, on the grassroots level, has started to organize. The LGBT people, even without the support of the government, even without the support of the NGOs and mainstream NGOs, have started to organize even the smallest things. Currently in Armenia we have LGBT clubs, we have drag shows, which is a reality that we wouldn't expect to have in the country probably 5-6 years ago. And this is because of the courage of the community itself. On our side, what we can do is just to support them, and I think this is what has worked so far. On our side as Freedom House, we are very strong in advocacy, so we have been doing a lot of advocacy, and also we are very influential, and the Armenian government listens to what organizations like us say usually. We have this platform in Armenia, which is called Armenian Forum for Democracy, organized by Freedom House every year. And this year, with the Prime Minister, and I was moderating the panel, we were speaking about the LGBT people, we were speaking about transgender rights, we were speaking about marriage equality. This is again something that wouldn't happen in Armenia, and I think this is very courageous. So I think we have to take the fate in our hands in many cases. There will always be dangers, there will always be setbacks, but I really like the word organizing. And if we stay in solidarity with each other, especially our countries as we are in the region, because democracies develop regionally, and only if Armenia and Georgia support each other, Armenia, Georgia, Ukraine, Russia, only if we support each other, if like-minded people stay in solidarity, I think this is the only way that we can topple down these restrictive legislations and the authoritarians in power.
Thanks so much. Would someone on the panel like to speak to Arab freedom, for example, of something that worked for us? Two people, but Tanya, you got to it first.
Okay. Actually, I was a project, a mentor of project which had the name Allies in Action. So I am ally actually. I am from journalist, and this is how I became an activist because I was writing about equality, human rights in general. And my goal was to find more allies in different spheres, in business, in politics, in media, and we have them. They have allies in business. We teach them, for example, DEI. We teach them rights of LGBT every year in June when we have Pride Month. Last 2 years, we have the highest number of rainbow logos of brands on social media because thanks to visibility of LGBT military, business started supporting it because there is like now a lot of veterans, a lot of military in Ukraine, and when you see that among them LGBT, you respect it. And also, we work a lot with media. We provided like trainings how to write, highlight LGBT issue in sensitive way. I am a compiler and author of Barrier Free Dictionary. It's initiative of First Lady Olena Zelenska, and it's dictionary on inclusive language, how to communicate to different people. And I suggested to add LGBT chapter, and it's it. So now journalists have the tool how to write correctly, ethically about LGBT. Also, we have allies among other NGO, like NGO for people with disabilities, NGOs for IDPs, etc. And we engage them, for example, when we create a petition in support of civil partnerships, 45 organizations signed it, and President Zelensky had to that. We see that we have allies because we get 25,000 of signatures in support of civil partnerships just in 2 weeks among Ukrainians. And also we have allies among members of parliament who registered actually this draft of law and among government, for example, Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And this is the first ministry in Ukraine in which open gay actually works.
Why don't we give that a round of applause? Before I go to Edna, I want to let you know, after she speaks, and Katya, if you want to weigh in on this as well, we're going to open it up to the audience for questions and comments. So please get your comments and questions ready. Edna, please.
Me personally and organization also, we believe in successful international equality, which means that we shouldn't divide and separate rights of certain groups from another group. And all marginalized groups have much more common than separation. And if we see these mutual struggles, it would be led to much bigger success. That is why we always build up our strategies on building bridges among different groups and find similarities in our struggles. And for example, we are successfully introducing LGBT women's rights in the women's rights agenda, or struggling with labor rights, and etc. And also introducing knowledge into the sphere of academia or education, because mainly homophobia based on unknown and lack of information. And if we see each other in the struggles, it will be a much bigger success for all of us. That is why, yes, LGBTQI rights are a litmus test for democratization, but we should do it together, not separate separate LGBTQI people from other marginalized groups, but see all struggles together. And why this group is retrospective? Because we do not have social support side. All other marginalized groups have their own families, their own communities to which they belong and in which they get care. LGBTQI people are excluded from that, excluded from their families, and that is why we much more support than others. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Edgar. Katya, would you like to comment on this as well? And maybe if you do, you could give us one anecdote of a success story working with allies. I know, I tricked you. I gave you the last opportunity to speak, but we want to show people best practices and inspiration.
Это трудно, да. Потому что я думаю, что вы понимаете, что после принятия решения Верховного суда большинство организаций, помогающих, они либо уехали из страны, либо они ушли в подполье. И да, очень сейчас сложно работать. Но мне кажется, что примером успешной истории остается то, что, во-первых, несмотря на действующее законодательство, в России все еще можно работать, помогать людям и защищать права. И в России остаются невероятно храбрые люди, которые продолжают это делать. И нам удавалось и оспаривать штрафы, и в делах о подставных свиданиях, точно так же добиваться наказания обидчикам. То есть все еще возможно, но стало все невероятно сложно.
Thank you for that reality check, Katya. I think sometimes the success is that you find a way to continue the work, even under difficult circumstances. I'd like to open it to the audience for any comments or questions that you have. You've chosen to be in this very toasty room in October. So I just want to say, you guys are real heroes, because you clearly want to be here. So please, let's go to the wonderful colleagues from Kazakhstan to kick it off. Please, you have the floor.
Рустам Жантасов, правозащитная инициатива Request, Казахстан. Да, на Казахстан тоже повлияла, да, так скажем, практика России. В этом году у нас пытались вести запрет на пропаганду ЛГБТ, но сообщество, квир-сообщество Казахстана, несмотря на внутренние проблемы, смогли объединиться, мобилизировать и очень хорошо отработать в этом плане, в том числе у нас была и национальная адвокация, и международная адвокация, и в любом случае мы победили в этой битве, но пока не в войне. Да? Вопрос такой, наверное, к вам, уважаемые коллеги. Может быть, стоит поговорить как раз-таки про мобилизацию, про солидарность между сообществом внутри страны, так и между нами, как представители квир-сообщества разных стран, да, и может быть из этого что-то выйдет. Спасибо.
Thank you so much. On the comments or questions, I'm going to take one, and then two, and then we'll see if we have time for any others. Please, and if everyone would just introduce themselves before they ask a question. We're a little bit tight on time.
It's like very, very short. Okay. So my name is Elizabeth Savage-Wolf. I represent Pax Europa. I have a question actually for you, Madam Ambassador. You mentioned in your speech non-traditional sexual relationship with minors. I'm totally new to all of this here today, and I don't really know what it means. Can you explain it to me? Or did I misunderstand or mishear? You said that in your speech. I actually took it down, but I noted it, but I don't know what a non-traditional sexual relationship with minors is, so I would appreciate it if you could explain it to me. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Please, and then we're going to try to squeeze in one question from the woman over here.
Yeah, maybe just a note from my side. I'm Sasha. I'm part of the audio team, and I would be happy to hear maybe a little bit from the participants if they could place this development in a more broader anti-democracy, anti-gender equality mobilization that we see globally. The stories that we hear from, of course, Belarus, from Russia, and now from Georgia with this extreme developments, literally working against the physical integrity and life of LGBTI people. This is indeed very sad, but equally sad, I would say, for Europe, Central Asia, and globally, are all the democracy and anti-gender equality developments. And to me, this is, as at least how I understand it from research and talking to people that do gender and politics research, this is in a way really interlinked. So there's no attack on LGBTI rights without an attack on women's rights, and there's an attack on principles of democracy. And I think it is very much important that we view it from that angle, as we have seen similar attacks taking place in West Vienna, as we say in the OSCE jargon. So it's not just something that relates to these countries, but it really relates also to the mobilization from especially populist right-wing movements that come in a way from Russia and the US, and that impact a lot the developments in our countries. In my own region where I come from, there's significant research that confirms, for example, the immense influence from both sides, and the Russian and the US side on developments, let's say, in North Macedonia. So if you could maybe tell a little bit more how you place this development in LGBTI rights in the broader gender backslide and anti-democracy backslide.
Thanks so much. Okay, last question.
Ага, спасибо. Меня зовут Асиса Красова, я из Кыргызстана. Во-первых, я хочу с вами делиться очень хорошей новостью. Буквально час тому назад вышли на свободу кыргызский писатель, публицист, автор книги «Адам плюс», он сейчас на свободе. Почему я это с вами делюсь? Его книга «Адам плюс», он посвящал своему сыну, который является трансгендером. И он своим простым писательским языком мог доводить до многих жителей Кыргызстана, до многих граждан, даже до меня, который я плохо понимала, что такое ЛГБТ, трансгендер. Да? Его книга написана очень простым языком, о трудности, которую переживал отец мальчика, который является трансгендером, и он осмелился об этом открыто писать, открыто объявить, что у него сын нетрадиционный. Семья прошла через такие трудности. И я предложение организаторам, у меня организация может все-таки принимать опыт Олжева Шапира, который сейчас на свободе, он был осужден на 6 лет, и буквально сегодня час тому назад он вышел, и как раз по теме я хотела, рекомендовала бы общаться с ним, как он все это простым языком говорил общественности. И общественность, на мой взгляд, очень позитивно воспринимала его язык. Спасибо.
Thank you so much for that really inspiring and beautiful story. We don't celebrate successes often enough. Could we please give this author and this freedom a round of applause? Okay, to our esteemed panel, we have several questions and we have just a few minutes left. Who would like to go first? Please.
So many good points were raised. I got goosebumps listening to the last speech. It's just about humanizing the LGBT people, because the community has been dehumanized, specifically the transgender community, for such a long time, and listening that coming from a father, I think that's a very touching story, and absolutely deserves the applause. About the solidarity, I think we don't need this networking anymore. I think we should connect with each other, and solidarity and organizing was something that I mentioned a lot in my speech, and absolutely we in the region and people that live in this region, none of us is going anywhere. We have to know how to speak with each other, and we have to back each other up, especially those, again, those of us that are like-minded, those of us that have each other's backs. I think we can't live in isolation, especially going to the question that was asked about this global decline of democracy. I think it's about, in general, about the bodily autonomy and how the first target of authoritarianism is human body, and how we see our bodies, how we control our bodies, and we see this everywhere. We see this in our side of the world, but we also see this in the US, for example, and how female bodies are, again, this contested topic in many countries in the world, and starting from the US. So again, I think it's about bodily autonomy, and I think we have to be protective how we speak and who we let to control our bodily autonomies, be it the LGBT community or women in general. And I absolutely agree that targeting LGBT people is also targeting women, is also targeting people with disabilities, and all the marginalized communities. Yeah, this is everything on my side. Thank you for the questions. I really got really emotional listening to your speeches.
Ambassador, did you want to say something?
Yes, thank you. Because there was a question directed specifically to me. I just wanted to say that what I did say was that I referred to Russia's so-called gay propaganda law, which initially prohibited providing information about so-called non-traditional sexual relationships to minors.
Yes, exactly. But what does it mean?
I think it's pretty clear what I mean. Thank you.
We have about 5 minutes left. Feel free to continue talking to the panel after. But Katya, I think you had your hands up, and I want to make sure we have time for our final ambassador to speak as well. Please.
Я бы хотела ответить на комментарий о том, что нам нужно, конечно, объединяться и вместе работать. И я как правозащитница и юристка, я могу сказать, что мне кажется очень хорошей идеей, если мы будем собираться организациями бывшего постсоветского пространства и друг с другом будем проговаривать проблемы, с которыми каждый из нас сталкивается в своей стране. Если мы видим тенденцию, что законы, которые принимаются в этих странах, они, не хочу говорить, идут от России, но очень похожи на то, что происходит в России. И мы уже с этим сталкиваемся, с делами против экстремизма, с делами пропаганды. Мы можем вместе думать о том, как нам прорабатывать общую стратегию. Мне кажется, это очень важно. И я думаю, что мы с коллегами, если они желают, останемся и потом обсудим это. Спасибо.
Thank you, Katya. Katya, raise your hand up.
Yeah, I am proud to say that. I truly believe that we should rethink all strategies we have, because yes, Georgia doesn't have like unique scenario. Yeah, we are part of the bigger geopolitical tendencies and equity in a small country. So I think that this narrow down approach of human rights, just focusing on legislation and evidence, and narrow down on these concepts, cause of respects like this. We should broaden our concept. We should think about changing attitudes, like positive changes in society. We should work on empowerment of local communities, and we should develop more sophisticated, more holistic strategies. I mean, not only civil society, but also international stakeholders, donor organizations, to see diverse ways of intervention, diverse way of protection of human rights. In that case, we will succeed. Otherwise, I'm doubting that this process will be aggravating more and more.
you so much, Eka. Panelists, we have come almost to the end, and I promised that there would be one final question for all of you before we go to our concluding speaker, Ambassador Anne-Marie Callan. And the final question that I have for you is one about hope. We do this incredibly hard work, we come to conferences, we hope to find allies, we hope to learn best practices, but we also want to find ourselves in a better world than we're in today. So the question for our panel is, in more or less one sentence, where do you want to be in 3 years? Eka, why don't you go first?
I hope we will all have this prize at the election in October, and we will have opportunity to struggle and to fight further, stay how to say, active in Georgia, not to be as possible in other countries.
I think that was an excellent use of one sentence that's so long it's like Faulkner.
In 3 years, I hope that Ukraine wins, and I hope that we will have civil partnerships, at least civil partnerships in Ukraine, and I hope to be in my occupied city Mariupol.
I'm usually looking at the positive sides of the things, and I just want to say if there's even if we are one step closer to equality, to a better world, even in 3 years, I will be very content.
Я бы очень хотела пригласить вас через 3 года всех на проект Петербург, откуда я сама. Я надеюсь, что это получится, и мы встретимся там.
We're going to go now to our final speaker. We have the great pleasure of hearing final remarks from Ambassador Anne-Marie Callan, the permanent representative of Ireland to the OSCE.
Thank you very much to you, U.S. Special Envoy Stern, for moderating this really excellent event. I also want to thank Ambassador Anna Olsen-Brown and the panelists for really insightful contributions that are incredibly uplifting. So thank you for that. It's always deeply concerning to hear about the challenges and the discrimination and the violence that is faced by LGBTQI persons across the region. And I think speakers here have very correctly highlighted that inextricable link between the global pushback on LGBTQI rights and also the backsliding of human rights, democracy and rule of law. And I think that it's also important, as you've done here, to look and see what can be done. How can allies, how can civil society work together to turn the situation around, to make a difference, to make positive change. And I think you've really successfully done that in a very short time. And for me, just hearing the stories of allies and the story of Kyrgyz's father who wrote about his transgender song, they're such positive examples. And I think now is really the time for us to reaffirm our commitment to the rights of LGBTQI persons, and not only in words, but also in practice. I think that we need to really emphasize the universal nature of human rights, and I think that it's important not to play into the negative narratives by allowing certain groups to be targeted or to be set aside. Human rights can only be fulfilled when they apply fully and equally to all people, irrespective of gender identity, sexual orientation, or any other protected characteristics. And I just want to reaffirm that the promotion and protection of the rights of LGBTQI persons will remain a foreign policy priority for Ireland. Thank you.
Please join me in giving the Ambassador and our extraordinary panel and all of you for surviving the heat a round of applause.
neutrality.